This is an updated version of my original beef stroganoff recipe. It's served with soft, tender beef, juicy and soft mushrooms, all cooked in a beautiful cream-based sauce. It has so much flavour, it's super easy to make. Let's get down to business. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy. Alright, starting out, we'll place a large pot of water onto our stovetop over a high heat. Generously season it with salt, getting this water nice and salty, as that's what's going to make that pasta taste really nice. Then place a lid on and just allow it to come to a boil in the background. Whilst that's doing its thing in the background, we can then do our prep. We're going to need one brown or yellow onion, and we can remove the tip, leaving the root intact. Slice it in half, and then you don't need to see me peel off those scraps. Make thin slices across the onion, stopping at the root. This will hold it intact so it doesn't fall apart and makes it a lot easier to dice. Then slice through the center horizontally to break up the formation, and then come across and just dice this into small to medium sized pieces, making sure that you trim off any excess flesh from around that root, and then this can be saved for a stock. This right here is 300 grams of Swiss brown mushrooms. They're also known as cremini or baby portobello, and they have a beautiful color on top, which is what gets our sauce nice and dark. I'm going to show you 3 different ways to slice these. The first way is just to lay it on its side and slice across. The second way is to remove the stalk so you can lay it flat on the bench. I actually think this might be the safest way, especially if you're just starting out with a knife or you don't quite have the confidence to do so, but we also want to make sure we trim that stalk as well. And then the last one is to just lay it on the stalk, push down and slice across, but you choose whichever one works for you. Next, we're going to need 4 cloves of freshly peeled garlic. Run them along a microplane or fine box grater like we usually do, just to create a paste, and that paste is going to work really well in the sauce, getting us the most flavour out of it. Last but not least, we're going to need 350 grams of eye fillet, scotch fillet, ribeye, rump, any of those types of steaks that are really nice and tender. And eye fillet is actually one of the most tender cuts of beef anyway, because there's not that much fat or muscle tissue in there, but we do want to slice across the grain just to break up the muscle tissue and fiber to result in the most tender beef. Slicing these into really nice thin strips, that way they can cook quickly and get a nice crust on them. Also, eye fillet doesn't have much fat on there either, but if you're using a different cut of steak, you can remove some of that fat, but it does increase flavor, so it's up to you how you want to do it. But with that done, you should have something that looks like this. That can then be placed onto a plate or in a bowl and just generously season it with salt, giving it a mix around, and this is going to give us a nice seasoned beef ready to cook for the next step. Let's then place a large high-rimmed pan over a medium-high heat, add in 1 tablespoon or 20 milliliters of olive oil, and that isn't extra virgin olive oil, it's just regular cooking olive oil. Then we're going to add in that beef and just do it in batches, and just spread this around so it's not sitting on top of one another, and sear these for about 30 to 40 seconds on each side, just to get that nice brown crust. Once you have all of that done, we can then remove these, placing them onto a plate, and we'll allow them to rest. And obviously we're doing this in batches, so then just repeat that with the other batch. Now into the same pan, still over a medium-high heat, add in 28 grams of unsalted butter, allowing it to start melting. Then we're going to add in the diced onion and saute for 3 minutes just to pick up that delicious flavour and get a nice bit of translucency on the onion as well as colour. The onions will start to release a bit of moisture, which will pick up some of that stuck flavour, and I do recommend hitting this up with a little bit of sea salt flakes here as well, which will help that moisture extract. If it does happen to get a little bit dark on the bottom of the pan, you can add a splash of water or stock, which will help bring up any of that stuck flavour and obviously reduce the risk of anything burning. Next to go in is all of those thinly sliced mushrooms, and we're going to saute these for about 6 to 7 minutes, not 67 minutes. And during this time, the mushrooms will pick up a lot of moisture and this will look dry, but as they cook down, the mushrooms will release all of their moisture into the pan and also act as a deglazer to remove anything that might be stuck and obviously get nice and soft and reduce in size. At this stage, we can then add in the garlic, and we're going to continuously mix this just for about 30 seconds. We want to get that infusion into the mushrooms and the onion as well as that beef flavour, but we don't want it to burn. That's why we're continuously mixing it around just to reduce a little bit of the heat. Obviously you can reduce the pan's heat, but that will just slow things down and we want to keep this moving. Next to go in is 30 grams of Dijon mustard. This will add depth and a nice tang to our sauce, and all we have to do with this is just mix it through for about 30 seconds just to get everything nicely coated. Follow that up with 80 milliliters of brandy. I'll leave details in the description if you can't consume alcohol, and this is going to deglaze the pan, also adding a little bit of acidity and also increased depth. As for this, give this a really good mix through and cook this for about 1.5 to 2 minutes until it's completely evaporated. And some people might say that alcohol just evaporates once it hits the pan, but it actually takes hours to eliminate alcohol out of foods like this. Once the brandy has evaporated, add in 24 grams of plain all-purpose flour and mix this through, getting everything coated, and cook this for 1 minute just to cook the flour taste out of everything. This is going to be used as our thickening agent, which will thicken our sauce, and I'm not using cream in this recipe, we're using something else, so we need a thickening agent, and plain flour is also a traditional ingredient in stroganoff. Once the flour's been cooked out, add in 30 milliliters of Worcestershire sauce for increased depth, a little bit of tang and a nice umami flavor. Then follow that up with 375 milliliters of beef stock, sea salt flakes to taste, as well as cracked black pepper, 20 cracks worth. Let's then give this a really good mix through so those flavors can become friends, and whilst mixing, increase the heat to high so that this can come to a boil, and once it is at a boil, reduce the heat to low and cook for 6 minutes to slightly reduced whilst mixing occasionally. We can then go back to the pasta water that we did at the beginning, remove the lid with this at a rolling boil. We can then add in 250 grams of fettuccine or any pasta of your choice and cook it as per the packet instructions, then just remove and drain. Going back to the sauce, this is nicely reduced over that 6 minutes and has become nice and thick, and if we scrape the bottom of the pan it is visible once we slide that through. Add in 120 grams of sour cream, that is full fat sour cream. I don't recommend using low fat, it's just too watery. I actually made a mistake recording this yesterday, so I had to re-record this video. And all we have to do with this is mix it through gently, still over a low heat. We don't want to cook this too much. At this point, I do recommend tasting the sauce and adjusting the seasoning if necessary. The salt levels were fine on this, so I added a little bit more cracked black pepper. But after you've done that, add in the seared beef that we did at the beginning, as well as any of the resting juices for increased flavor. And all we have to do with this is just gently mix it through. Don't go too rough with the beef, we don't want to break it up. And just cook this for about 1 minute, just to get that heat back through the beef. Then we can remove this from the stovetop. Now with a dish like this, you can add the pasta into the sauce whilst it's cooking, but for this I like to add it in after, because I think that the pasta actually absorbs too much of the sauce whilst it's cooking and then just becomes a little bit too dry, so I recommend doing it after like what I'm doing here, and then just fold it through until all of that sauce is coating that pasta. As for serving up, serve it in bowls, plates, or eat it straight out of the pan, whatever you're into. This recipe serves 2, so I have removed half of the pasta just so I can easily do this for the camera. Then we're going to top this with that beef and mushroom sauce, and you can also garnish with some flat leaf parsley if you wanted to. But what we're then left with is this beautiful creamy garlic beef stroganoff recipe, which is absolutely fantastic. As always though, there is only one thing left to do, and that is of course, we can then dig in. From something so simple, you get the most incredible flavor out of a dish like this. The depth in the sauce is incredible as well. You got the beef stock, the Dijon mustard, Worcestershire sauce, and brandy all working really well together. And if you're alcohol free, I'll leave details in the description of what you can use instead. Really recommend you try this recipe, it's extremely delicious. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit that like button, really does help me out, and consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.